Hey guys! So, Switzerland is a unique country since it has enough nuclear shelters for absolutely everyone in the country, and even some more for refugees from other countries in case they're ever needed. So, how did this happen, and why has this small country been able to preserve their neutrality for a century now? Well, we will try to answer these questions today, so be sure to watch to the end to learn many interesting things. So, Switzerland is famous for, its chocolate, right, and its neutrality. It isn't in the EU or NATO and only joined the UN in 2002. The country is so neutral, it hasn't been in any wars for over 200 years. The last one was against Napoleon in 1815. Since Switzerland is in the center of Europe, surrounded by historically more aggressive countries, why has Switzerland been so stable and safe for centuries? Well, the answer is in geography. Switzerland can be split into three separate parts. The south has the Swiss Alps, a mountain range that takes up a lot of land and separates it from Italy and Austria. The Jura Mountains are to the north and west. They're a little smaller than the Alps, but are big enough to keep France away. Finally, the Swiss Plateau, which is a hilly region with many rivers and lakes, and where most of the country's population lives. Now, Switzerland's largest cities are in this region, not the other two, and that's not by accident. In World War I, Germany invaded neutral Belgium to attack France from a better position. During World War II in 1940, the country ended up being completely surrounded by occupied territory. They were under an unavoidable threat of Nazi German invasion, so on May 14th at 10 p.m., Swiss generals ordered for the army to be battle-ready. But a real invasion never came. About 430,000 soldiers were called to fight since the onset of World War II. The Swiss armed forces were ready. They had foot soldiers, their air force, and anti-air defense at the ready. By the way, the latter was immensely beneficial in eliminating air threats. Swiss fighters shot down several German planes. Hitler understood that the 450,000-strong Swiss army wouldn't surrender without a fight, and the mountainous terrain seriously limited their main strike force, tanks. So, they left the country alone. During a potential Soviet invasion, the country developed a special plan called National Redoubt, which was designed so any enemy general looking at a Swiss map would say, "No thank you, I'll try capturing something easier." This Swiss army kept growing. In 1961, it had about 880,000 soldiers, 12% of the country's population. However, this trend gradually decreased by decreasing the upper bound of the conscription age. In 1995, there were 400,000 soldiers and just 220,000 in 2022. The country still has mandatory military service. Each man must serve for 170 days and pass basic training. After service, they are part of the reserves and must keep weapons at home and go through annual 2-week repeating training courses. It's terrifying to think what kind of army this country with 9 million people could mobilize. Besides that, all the roads, bridges, tunnels, and railroads in Switzerland were designed in a way to be remotely exploded so that potential invaders couldn't use them. There are over 3,000 places like this throughout the country, including mountain ranges where they could cause explosions to block roads. In addition, the Swiss military strategy is based on almost all the soldiers retreating to the mountains. They have built over 26,000 bunkers and fortified positions. They have anti-tank and anti-air weapons and machine gun emplacements there. So this rock is actually an anti-tank cannon, and the shed has a machine gun emplacement on the left and anti-tank weapons on the right. They are both connected through underground tunnels. Now, these types of camouflage positions are scattered through the Swiss Alps. Where do you think the Swiss Air Force is based? During non-peaceful times, they use mountain caves as cover. It seems like the whole country is just one big trap, an impenetrable fortress in the middle of Europe. So, during the Cold War, Switzerland took nuclear threats very seriously. In 1963, the country aggressively began developing a program that would result in literally every citizen having a place in an anti-radiation bunker in case of nuclear attack. It seems that experts agree that it's impossible to prepare for a direct attack, and you just have to react to one. But what would happen if a nuclear warhead detonated in a remote region of the world, and the radiation cloud moved towards Switzerland from there? Well, it all begins with informing the population in case of an emergency situation. The Swiss national TV channel and the radio company SRG play a key role here. Everyone in Switzerland is taught from childhood. The siren is on, so I need to turn on the first national channel and wait for further information. Throughout Switzerland, there are over 7,000 loudspeaker stations with sirens to warn the population. The sirens are tested on the first Wednesday of February every year. Now, depending on the type of threat, people are recommended to stay at home, close their windows and doors, or to head to the shelter. They could probably even recommend taking an iodine 125 pill too. Packages with iodine pills are given out to everyone near atomic power plants every 10 years by the government as a preventative measure in case of an unexpected emergency. The medicine prevents absorbing radioactive isotypes in the thyroid using iodine and protects the thyroid from radiation. When taking iodine pills while affected by radiation, it has an effectiveness of about 97%. It's supposed that in case of a radiation warning, the municipalities, cantons, and civilian defense organizations will have enough time to provide the population with food and water. Simultaneously, citizens are always recommended to keep their own reserve supplies. The results of finishing an almost 20-year program to improve the structure of civilian defense show a possibility to provide space and radiation protection for all the citizens without exception. Each resident should have a protected place they can quickly get to from their home, and the owners of apartment buildings are required to build and furnish shelters in all new buildings according to Statutes 45 and 46 of the Swiss federal law for civilian protection. Why do the Swiss have reinforced steel doors to the basements of small homes? Thanks to the thick armored door and the ventilation system with an anti-gas filter, if the worst happened, about 25 people could survive a nuclear attack in such a home. In 2006, Swiss homes, institutions, and hospitals calculated 300,000 shelters, as well as 5,100 general shelters that could protect 8.6 million people. For several years, Switzerland could boast of having the largest civilian defense project in the world. Up to 20,000 people could take cover in the Sonnenberg Tunnel in Lucerne. The structure is a large hole in the rock and has 2 Autobahn tunnels in it. The structure can provide cover from chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons, and in case of exterior contamination in the surface and air. The air all passes through 110 filters. A shelter's central block houses all its technical systems and life support systems, a 3-story hospital, as well as a warehouse for necessary supplies for 20,000 people taking shelter in the Autobahn tunnels. It also provides them with bathroom facilities and sleeping areas. There are enough supplies for 2 weeks. So the Swiss, without a doubt, are the world champions of building shelters. A cursory international review is enough to prove that no other country can compete with Switzerland. The closest competitors are Sweden and Finland. But with 7.2 and 3.4 million protected places respectively, which is approximately 81% and 70% of their total populations, they are still far behind. It's not even worth mentioning the situations in other European countries. For example, Austria has enough for 30% of its population. However, most of the shelters do not have a ventilation system. Germany's national level is just 3%. There are nuclear shelters outside Europe, like in China, South Korea, Singapore, India, and other countries, but none of them have a capacity of 50% of their population. Israel has enough shelters for 70% of the population. However, these structures are often just cement shells, so they aren't the most protective against radiation. So it's surprising, but the Swiss continue to maintain and develop their shelter infrastructure, even now when most countries have given up such expensive preventative measures. The government decided that they are still useful, and maybe not just for armed conflicts, but in a world with potential terrorist attacks, dirty weapons, chemical accidents, and natural disasters too. The Swiss nuclear shelters continue to have a bright future. Well, that's all for today. Leave a like, comment, tell me, would you be willing to stay in one of these shelters for a few weeks? And we'll see you again next time.